So very excited to be here. Thank you for joining us today. We have, I think, a fantastic panel. We have a fantastic topic, and I'm looking forward to get into it. Essentially, we're going to spend some time today talking about a very large insurance organization that, I don't have a better word for it. They basically had the courage to say, I'm going to shut off a mainframe, and I'm going to move everything to the AWS cloud. So it's an enormously complex project. And it has been a roaring success, not without its challenges, but it's been a roaring success, and I'm really excited to welcome our panel to stage, and we'll get started. So please join me, Satendra, Bryce, and Terry.
Okay, where do I bring there?
And real quick, we'll start on the end. Terry, if you'll just each introduce yourself. It is bright, right?
Yeah, sure.
Introduce yourselves.
I can't see anyone. It is very bright up here. So Terry Buechner, this says on the slide there, I'm the head of core system modernization for AWS for insurance. I'm part of our business development function within the organization. I've been with AWS for about 5 years, in the industry for about 20 years overall. Ran the digital consulting practice at Majesco for 3 years prior to joining, and 12 years at IBM in various insurance-focused roles with our global business services team, including 5 years in Japan and 2 years in Latin America. And a fun fact about me is I am both a cancer, like Satendra here, but know that I am a volunteer firefighter in my hometown and a captain in engine company number 46.
Thank you. My name is Satyendra Kumar, and I work at the Lincoln Financial, and I'm the executive sponsor for this cloud migration program.
I'm Bryce Molnoff. I lead DXC's insurance software and BPS business for the Americas, and have been through this journey over the last couple of years working closely with my friend Satendra here.
All right, and I didn't introduce myself. I'm Eddie Jones, and I'm with DXC's insurance software and BPS division. I'm responsible for market strategy and some of our fantastic partnerships. So first off, Satendra, if you'll kick us off, some of them in the audience may not know the backstory of Lincoln Financial's initiative to get off the mainframe and migrate everything to the AWS cloud. Will you please describe the decision criteria and the journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always see it in, there are two main drivers, right? One is a macro driver. So if you really look at our insurance industry, 70% of our industry is still running on legacy technologies, right? We generate $1.4 trillion in premiums. We are the second largest contributor to GDP, but we are still running technologies which are 50 years, 60 years, 70 years old, right? So that is the macro region from the industry perspective. At Lincoln, right, we have a cloud-first strategy, and we had a desire to future-proof the company, number one. Second was to reduce the expense, and third was to improve the speed to market, right? All of that coming together, and we decided that it's time to go on this audacious journey to really look to modernize Lincoln and be ready for the future. Because as you know, Lincoln is a 100-year-old company, and we want to be excelling and thriving for next 100 years. So this is part of the bigger strategy of the organization, which aligns well with our speed to market, being a differentiator in the marketplace, but also future-proofing the company and reducing the expense.
And what were some of the results, of the project? How did you measure success?
So first of all, you have to let me just explain you how mammoth it is, right? Then you will appreciate how do you measure success. So we have roughly 120 applications. 20 is our core administrative systems, which are DXC products, right? So there are 20, I call them the heart and the mind of the company, right? Heart and the brain, and then there is surround systems attaching to that. Roughly is 75 million line of code, right? There are 6,000 interfaces, right? So you're trying to take the whole house and move it to cloud. So I just want us to appreciate the challenge, the size, the complexity of interfaces, data. And your question was, right? What is the sum of the challenges and some of the results, right? So I will go on the results first because you asked results, right? Throughout the journey, one of the first KPI was how many MIPS we are reducing on the mainframe, right? So as we move the workload off from mainframe, you have to measure the MIPS reduction because that's where you get your financial benefit back. The second one was, so that's a financial result. Then second is the KPI is like what the performance is, right? The functionality-wise and the performance-wise. So we measure that, right? How it was performing on the mainframe and how it's performing on cloud. And third was speed to market, right? While doing this program, we did not stop the day-to-day business, right? So at Lincoln, we are doing product releases, we are doing enhancements, and we are doing other changes. And we ensured that as we move from mainframe to cloud, and within 2 weeks, we are ready to follow with a product launch in cloud. So those were the main KPIs were reducing mainframe, ability to deliver, and the third was overall how it performs in the new environment.
And Bryce, what are some of the valuable lessons that you've learned and DXC has learned from this project working on such a massive scale?
Yeah, it was a journey, and we learned a lot. We've moved Vantage, those core systems that Satendra talked about, largely these Vantage and some very large 3 million policies on just one. We've moved those to the cloud numerous times. So that wasn't something that was new or too concerned about. But the complexity that Satendra talked about with the interfaces around it and just the size and the scale, that was a challenge. We learned a lot together through that. So I would say a couple things come to mind. One is I think we learned that early on, get involved with the security team and the CISO and get a plan for how you're taking huge amounts of customer data and moving them into different environments, and you just have to be connected on a plan. The other is we were really confident in moving the core system, that Vantage, one in this case, but we did not have the insight and the underlying technologies in all these surround systems. And in some cases, I think we found out they had been there for years and nobody really had that insight. So we learned as we went, which made on a challenging schedule. There was a lot of lessons learned late, technologies like FEPI in place that won't work in AWS, and we spent a lot of time, last minute adjusting for those and trying to stay on schedule. So if we did this again, I think we'd spend more time learning about the surrounding technologies. And probably the other thing that comes to mind for me is that there is, from a business standpoint, it is important, and Lincoln did this well, and Satendra, understand what is most important. Because we're going to get to a place, especially in an accelerated schedule, where you have to make a decision. You can't try to perfect everything day one. So there's going to be some things that are day two activities, and if you try to perfect everything day one, you'll never get it done. But it's important to make sure you're connected with the business and understand what's important to them, and you got to get those things right. And again, that's something I think Satendra led that through this experience.
Thanks. And Terry, from your perspective, observing what was accomplished at Lincoln and how it evolved, how have you seen similar trends and similar moves globally across the insurance industry? So, blow it out from a macro perspective. What does it look like?
Well, I think one, and you kind of pointed it to in your introduction there, just the getting started in this is a big notable exception. As Satendra was pointing out, the industry is still, particularly on the life insurance side, fairly far behind, still a lot of use of legacy technology, very old legacy technology too. And it can be intimidating to make that move to get started. So I think notable for actually getting started. Not unique in the industry, of course. We see there is acceleration in this space thanks to a lot of factors, a lot of the headwinds in the industry kind of forcing the issue. But it is notable just to get started. I think it's also notable that the scope, as we were talking about, more than 10 policy systems, right? And 120 systems overall. Pretty significant scope, and then notable speed. I mean, 2 years, our industry is not noted for moving fast, right? And for 2 years in insurance, that is the blink of an eye. And I think that what we are seeing more of, but it's still notable, is, as Tindra was describing, kind of a cross-pollination and communication among stakeholders, business and IT. We tend to, particularly in insurance, operate in a very siloed way. And even more particularly when you're talking about legacy technologies too, right? That's the legacy team. They're working on that. We don't need to talk to them. We'll just tell them what to do. And on the IT side, same thing. The business people don't understand what's going on here, what the complexities are, et cetera. So again, not unique, but it is notable that there was great stakeholder communication throughout the process. Also, kind of a top-down vision, very important for large transformational deals of any sort, but a top-down vision promulgated by your senior leadership and talked about throughout the process too. So again, that is a trend that is accelerating in the industry, but it is not, by no means is it universal in insurance and in particular life insurance. I think some of the technologies too, newer technologies, some of the technologies being announced here today, of course, will be able to help accelerate these kinds of things. But in particular, the maturation of the concept of running COBOL on the cloud, some tools that have come out in the past couple of years and others that have been able to accelerate and normalize that to provide different routes to running your mainframe less expensively, more reliably, and more flexibly as well, all those kinds of things that we're trying to do. So that is starting to accelerate too in the industry, and I see, again, hopefully some of the things we're talking about this week in reInvent will accelerate that even further.
Can I take this stab at the challenge piece? I think Bryce saying, so first you talk about the velocity, right? You're talking about 75 to 100 million of code, 120 system, and 2 years, right? It's high velocity, high momentum. If you really look at the transformation success rate in industry is 8%, because sometimes we try to do it slow, but by the time 3 years hits, your macroeconomic indicators have changed, micro indicators have changed, and the people are tired and weary of this, right? So our goal was to do it fast, furious, and get it right, right? The challenges, I will break it a little differently. I will share from our perspective inside, right? First is an organizational complexity, right? You're talking DXC product, DXC DNA, Lincoln, customization of the product, Lincoln surround system. So first was the organizational complexity because you have 5 to 6 partners working. And how do you bring everyone together, as you said, right, from top to bottom, from like we had support from our CEO, CIO, everyone. We had the support from DXC, president downward, with other partners the same, right? So that, I think the most important, most of the people see that as a technical journey. I would call it as a journey of human spirit, right? That we knew is hard, very complicated, and roughly there were 1,000 people working across the partner. All 1,000 working all the time, humming together for the same purpose, right? That was organizational complexity. And then there was a technical complexity because you are fundamentally changing the data structure. You are taking some of the old technologies, right, which are disparate, disjointed. Like it's like I always talk, it's like Irishman movie. If you watch an Irishman movie, right, you have 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, everything you name it, is there in the system. Mm-hmm. So there is lack of institutional knowledge. People doesn't know. It has been working for 20 years. The people doesn't know how it works. There were missing code source. So some of the interfaces, we had the code for the core, but the interfaces, the code is not there. So you have to reverse engineer the code, right? So organizational complexity, missing source code, and third would be like the data. The data, you're taking so much of data, and over the 60 years, the old system, you put junk data, you use this field for this purposes, that purposes, customize the heck out of it. How do you take the data and structure it and streamline it? And fourth was the security and compliance, right? Because in mainframe, it is an implicit security. When you go to cloud, every transaction has to be tokenized and encrypted. Every user has to be tokenized, and that was a big. So these were the 4 main challenges I would show anyone who is venturing on this. Don't forget the people. This 1,000 people make it happen, not few people who are sitting here. So organizational complexity, people, technology, data, and security. That's how I saw the challenges.
So let's dive a little more into the stakeholder management. So board members, presidents, partners, vendors, 1,000 people on the team, there's a lot of stakeholders involved. How did you effectively manage those relationships and keep everything on track?
So I will break it into pieces, right? One is internal at the Lincoln. So we had the executive support, but you have to still give a good roadmap so everyone can buy into it, right? So when we went through the RFI process and RFP process, when we were working together, solutioning and designing, we brought 50 leaders from Lincoln to vet out the solution, what DXC presented, right? So 50 people involved. We created a Wikipedia. So we democratized the whole data, that this is what we know about the system, this is what it works, and we put it out there and let people react to it. That we tried to improve the engagement rate of the organization. And people were like, and we asked question, why it would not work. So people will say, oh, this is a challenge, this is a challenge. That was a human bringing together. For the partners, what we did was, we ensured that each of our partners, we met before the program started, from senior leadership and the team, and we created one team mindset and broke the barriers. Because you cannot clearly say in this legacy environment which part belongs to who, right? Is it DXC, is it Lincoln, is it Cognizant, so you have to really be as one team that, okay, we have a problem, can we come together and solve it, right? So first was the internal stakeholder, and very transparent and effective communication. Very transparent, where we are, what challenges we might, face, and being very transparent about it, that this is a path never traversed before. So we actually came up with this idea of calling known, means the things you know for sure and you know how to solve it. The second part was the things you know we don't know the solution, but we know that we have to work on it. And third was the unknown. We don't know what will hit us, but it will hit us, right? And there we tapped into a lot of Navy SEAL strategies, right? They prepare for that, unknown, right, events. I share an example all the time. It's the Osama bin Laden capture, right? The Navy SEAL prepared, practiced, they land in the compound and the chopper crashes, and they still complete the mission. So that we had a SWAT team across the teams and the leadership, right? That when that unknown comes, how do we solve it without getting flustered? And obviously we had a governance with all our partners, right? We have a weekly governance within Lincoln where everyone comes. For our interface, every day, 300 people get on the call talking about all 300 interfaces. So we kept it very engaging. It's like a mission versus just a project. But everyone just leaned in, always interacting. And internal governance, then there was external governance with DXC president, with our CIOs, and similar structure we put it, and then with all the partners. Hopefully that satisfies the question.
I'd like to get Bryce's perspective on that as well. For a massive effort of this size, what are your observations of how it managed?
Yeah, I would say one is, we've talked about the velocity, 2 years.
Yeah.
But don't lose sight, the business didn't stop the 2 years.
Yes.
So some people make decisions, they're going to put, stop the enhancements, and we're going to just focus on doing this. So the coordination and the communication and the visibility all along the way was so important. And this is really what Lincoln and Satendra did at the beginning. When they say they involved that at all levels up to the president, whether it was DXC or AWS or Micro Focus or all, we knew we were going to run into those unknowns. And the idea of being able to mobilize quickly in that SWAT type environment and solve those problems, and those problems you needed to work together. That worked. It wasn't easy. It wasn't always easy, but it worked well.
Yes, absolutely agree with that.
Randy, can I mention one thing around that? So one of the things I love about this project is very cool, is what we talk about at Amazon. When I talk to customers a lot, we try to position our customers to become what we call a modern digital business, and of course, in this case, modern digital insurer. It's based on our own Amazonian example of how we built our business and built AWS over time. And it has 5 characteristics. One, first and foremost, being customer obsessed. But the next 3 are, and you're also customer obsessed, I know, but the 3 that for this project are very important. So one is being organized for value. That's having small, agile teams. We refer to them as 2 pizza teams. They're small enough to be fed with 2 pizzas that are empowered to make decisions and empowered to act. And building the next characteristic is having a test and learn culture. So to encourage innovation, encourage testing, not punish failure, right? You had to, with all these people, you had to reassure them that in this big transformational journey that we're all taking these risks together. So you take calculated risks, identify those known unknowns, unknown unknowns, others, and we're going to support you in that journey too, so building that test and learn culture. The next characteristic is modernize core. So modernizing your core, which you're doing as well, of course, and then get to the point of the 5th characteristic is the strategic use of data, which we need to do in insurance better, right? All the data that we have, all the external data that's out there that we can ingest, marry those 2 things together and really drive better customer outcomes too. So I love this story for many reasons, but it also is a perfect example of that idea of moving toward becoming that modern digital insurer. It's very cool.
I'll just concur to that, right? That decision making, and we actually encouraged test and fail
Totally, yeah.
early because no one knows how to solve it, right? So there is the Bryce was talking about FEPI, which is screen scraping tool. We screen scrape everything. There's no replacement of that.
Right.
Okay, you can say API, you can say stored proc, you can say program to program call, but which solution of that will actually maintain the reliability, stability, and performance, you don't know that.
Right.
So you are going at it all the time. So I know I'm sitting here very calm and Bryce is very calm, but this is not for a faint of heart.
No, definitely
right?
not.
You really have to be into it and really empower, provide the safe space for everyone to work together, not point fingers, just look for solution and try. It works. We had to go back on like drawing board so many times. Like we will go there almost one finish line. Out of 300 interface, one application has 309 interface, 500 connection point. One point is not working. And that is holding up everything because we don't have the solution for that. And that's require innovation, invention,
Right.
and that creative mindset because you don't know who will provide the solution. And that's where we tapped into the power of Lincoln, right? Everyone at Lincoln, everyone at DXC. It was not a project team. We will flash that problem statement. Does anyone in the world know the solution for this? And we actually, I will not share, but we also created a reward structure in some organization. If you can solve this problem, this is the reward for this problem. So we used every tools and technology, the strategy at our hand to try, fail, solve, innovate. And that's how we were able to solve those complicated problems.
So Terry, in some ways, you can describe this as the end of the beginning.
Right.
So looking forward, what does the next phase look like for a cloud-based digital insurer as they continue along this journey and transformation?
Well, I think one of the biggest results or lessons learned from this is that there are many different paths you can take to to modernizing your systems. And each insurer is going to take their own path that is unique to their business situation, what current IT they have, what their goals are too. So the next step for many carriers out there is really that first step of identifying what you're trying to achieve. Is it pure cost savings? Is it stabilization of some of the workloads? Is it moving into new products? I know that you mentioned you're doing all those things, all of that, right? So that's great, but identifying what those goals are, what the value is that you're trying to achieve, really, and then identifying and agreeing across business and IT, all the stakeholders, what that value is. These are our goals. This is what we're going after, and working backwards from there to identify that. And there's a plethora of new tools out there, and more maturing tools, existing tools that are maturing. COBOL in the cloud now too. That's becoming, as I mentioned before, a more common and more understood way of achieving some of the quick wins, quick, relatively speaking, but actually really quick in the case of Lincoln Financial, of running older systems, modernizing into a more modern language to Micro Focus COBOL, generally from old COBOL and assembler, running those on the cloud too. That is obviously a very viable and a very effective way of achieving certain goals. It could be for some carriers out there to use a more modern, out-of-the-box modern system across different lines of business, of course. Probably going to be more common on the P&C side than on the life side. Individual life, with decades of policy information still being transacted to, very complicated to try to make that migration and get a new product in place as well. It can be done, there are examples of that too. But it's going to depend on that particular situation. And I think that as these new tools, some of which are being announced this week, hopefully you saw some of the keynotes around that. Don't ask me about them yet because I've been in sessions this entire time, so I've not had a chance to read through or look at our keynotes with all the new announcements other than sort of headline level. But they're very exciting, and I think they're going to be accelerating these migrations, accelerating the ability to modernize and migrate, and really open up carriers' minds to the potential to do it. A big part of it is looking at great examples like Lincoln to, these are, they've actually done it. Carriers, and I'm sure there's some in the room, we love to have examples of named customers who've done it. Typically, I'm very proud of you guys because typically not as good at sharing your own name with the public as well. So it's very nice to see that. It's a refreshing change. But that, the examples are there. Best practices have been harvested. Pitfalls have been identified and worked through. And there's a lot of expertise out there, right? From partners like DXC, amazing expertise there, our own expertise at AWS, examples like from Lincoln. So I think that is sort of what we see is coming next. And then driving more value too, right? Rolling out those new products. Now you have more agile systems so you can test and learn, bring that test and learn culture to rolling out new products and services. I think our customers in the industry are, as we say in Amazon, they're wonderfully dissatisfied, right? Maybe it's hard to imagine them that way sometimes, but they want omni-channel, they want new product options, they want it cheap, they wanted all these things. It's tough to do that with those creaky old legacy systems. But once you get some of those wins under your belt, then you can start to experiment with some of those capabilities, new services, new products, new markets, and really try to drive some growth in the industry.
So Satendra, you mentioned earlier that you're laying a foundation for the next 100 years. So what does the next phase look like? What are you excited about?
Yeah, it's pretty exciting, right? And that's why I will say it, right? Lincoln has been on the forefront of technology, right? So we wanted to see what's possible here, right? Because this is the biggest challenge. So we took three-prong approach, right? 1/4 of our technology, we completely rewrote with the cloud-native languages. 1/4 of our portfolio, we replaced with the new cloud-native products, right? We replaced it. And this half we are talking here, roughly 30 million line of code, we took. So if you really look at the past, right, you have to understand the past that why future is beautiful, right? We have 250 plus different softwares, 50 to 60 different technology stack and version. Just getting from there to 25 is just 600% technical simplification, right? So we are becoming cloud native. This is, I would say, is cloud enabled, right? What we did with DXC is cloud enabled. So now you're in a containerized space, you have APIs, you can vertically scale, you can horizontally scale. And through power, I think you mentioned, Terry, the data, right? Why we have insurance has not been able to use their data effectively to upsell, change the product, innovate, because the data has been so fragmented, disjointed, sitting in a vSAM files. Now that is the exciting part. I wouldn't say it's a complete transformation. This is the cusp of true digital transformation. Your business will start changing. So the Gen AI, data mining, data lake. Now you have the data and the processes in a simplified, cohesive, and future-looking way, and you can tap into that to innovate further, right? So I would say that this is a journey, but this is massive because now you can take that and you can do something with it in a very tangible way for your business decisions, and technology is just an enabler, right? And it will get to the next, from cloud enabled to, maybe cloud native in due time.
So you mentioned the simplification, so I'm going to go off script for a minute. So we have another large customer who moved to a similar project, not quite as accelerated, but they simplified from 700 to 70 applications. And so you think about the power. Actually, Bryce, if you would just comment on the power of that.
Well, the simplification, well, if you go back to what the business is trying to accomplish, in life insurance, what you find is to get a new product to market, it'll take you 18 months, 2 years, because you need to touch 80 systems. The definitions, the product definitions are in code. What this enables you to do when you simplify, you can enable and create a more agile company that can get a product to market in 6 months, and that's some of what we've seen. They can simplify the maintenance, the ongoing support, but at the end of the day, it's really about what it's enabling for the business, not about the underlying technology. That simplifying the environment really allows in this insurance industry that has these heritage systems that have been around forever. This gets them on the path. We call it kind of protect, extend, transform. And the protection, the way we talk about it is this industry, especially in life and wealth, is invested heavily over the last 30 years in a lot of technology, COBOL out there in the mainframe. The idea of just putting that aside and converting and going to a complete new platform is a heavy lift and very difficult to do if you think about all that knowledge and what's embedded. So by cloud enabling, as Satendra said, you create it, you get this into a new environment that you can leverage new capabilities, to access that data, to simplify. We've created, and there's plenty AI-type tools that you can plug in and start to use more readily, and all that helps enable the business and speed to market.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just additional comment to that, not to pile on a little bit, but something you had mentioned in terms of Gen AI capabilities and others. By having that modernized data estate, you can start to bring in some of those capabilities too. In the new product development, absolutely experiment with new products, new capabilities, new markets you want to go after. But even the current processing for life insurance, life and wealth is very slow and creaky, right? So how do we accelerate from going from, it takes 3 to 6 months to 3 months or so to bind a policy with somebody when you can use Gen AI and some other tools to do so on the spot practically. So they don't have that buyer's remorse, they don't have the 30 days to think about whether or not they actually want to write that check. And think about the agent interactions too. You can improve with that data, with the agility you can bring in to improve your intermediaries' interactions with their customers. So you can identify the right product sets for them. You're not just having a conversation that involves them writing a check. You're actually really thinking with them and supporting them with some of the modern tools that are out there and unlocking all that data that you have and being able to ingest all that third-party data that's out there and doing so in real time or close to real time to really enhance the sales experience, enhance the renewal experience. So it's not a painful experience for everybody involved. It's actually a positive experience for everybody involved. And insurance can start to get back to its core tenet of being a protector of life, wealth, and well-being overall, right? Rather than something sort of offline that we do. We have to write a big check in January every year to cover your life insurance policies and everything else. And humans are not very good about thinking in long-term financial terms. So using tools and capabilities that we have, in theory, available, if you have a modern data estate and modern tools, to be able to provide those services to your customers, your end customers, and your agents, intermediaries too. So very exciting.
So we also touched on security a little bit earlier, and I'd like to peel that back a little bit because that is something that we hear often, concerns about data security, concerns about security. How did you address, what were the complexities you saw and how have you solved for those in this environment?
So you have to really understand how today it works, right? Like mainframe is your 7-bedroom villa, right? Everyone has access to everything, right? You can go from this room to that room to that room to that room, right? Before I go to security, one benefit I will tell you how it will benefit business. Rolling out the product, I'm yet to see, so I'm not going to comment on it, that we will see it. See, when you take a big bedroom, 7-bedroom house, if you take a refrigerator out, or you take a kitchen sink out, you don't get the benefit, right? Here we have taken this 7-bedroom house and built it each application on its own, right? So we have a total cost of ownership for each application. So now you are giving a knob to the business that, hey, I don't want to sell that product, or I want to slow down there. You can slowly reduce the cost there, right? In cloud, you can do that because you can vertically scale, horizontally scale, so you can just shrink it. If you want to expand something, a business, you can just like expand that. In mainframe, is always at the peak capacity, right? So you always plan for peak. So that means even if you have 20 business lines, but one business line requires 10,000 MIPS peak, you will always have to maintain that, right? So first is that giving that power to business to decide where they want to spend money or not. Now I will come to the security part. And that's why it becomes important, because earlier you can just log into mainframe and can access program to program. But here, you are like sitting on cloud, you are accessing it, right? So your roles and responsibilities has to be really clear. What you intend to do, how you will do, what access you will have. And that is the bigger challenge, because you have to encrypt the data back and forth, so there's a latency. You have to tokenize every person coming in, so there is a latency, right? And that's where we have to solve for those things, because in mainframe security is very implicit, right? And here everything is explicit, every transaction, so you have to both, like if you're coming to cloud, back to on-prem, the port has to be encrypted here, port has to be encrypted there, data in transit have to be encrypted, the person who is accessing it has to have the right token. So that's why and this is important, right? Because the cyber threat is at all-time high, and with all these AI tools and everything coming, it's just going to increase. So if you really look at it, it's critical that we create that kind of security layer so no one can get in the house, that 7-bedroom house, who wants to just use the kitchen, but he has the access to the whole house, right? So it was hard, but I think you have to just be disciplined that each connection point, right? So I told you 309 interfaces, but that was 500 connection points. So we secure each connection point, each traffic route, the person and the data. Does it help?
Yeah.
Okay.
Bryce, you're also a customer of AWS with a very large operation for life and annuity. 30 million life and annuity policies run on Assure SaaS and Assure BPS environment. So what are your observations of the security challenges and the benefits of working with AWS?
Well, security is always at the forefront. Whenever you're, Satendra talked about, what's happening in the world in the cyber, issues, but when you're dealing with customer data, is always at the forefront. And when you start talking about cloud, it gets more and more part of the conversation. And so the way that we, think about the security, think about the data, side, we think about the, access and the monitoring. And what we've done is we've created what we've called the Assure platform. And it's a platform that we use to enable these heritage systems, to cloud enable. And what that platform does is it integrates and packages together this capability to deliver this. So from a security standpoint, on a data, we utilize AWS tools in that, and the data is encrypted at rest and in transit. When we talk about, we also use in that platform AWS tools, like CloudWatch and API Gateway for the monitoring of the environment. And then we have third-party tools that we've built around, and all this is built around these heritage, type platforms. And what we do is we build around these tools for the monitoring, the logs, and the automation. So we're able to identify suspicious activity in an automated way in the logs, and action results on that. That is all built in, to the platform that we produce as software, and we version and we release that. We also then, with the application layer of these, for access, we built out the authentication and authorization capabilities at the application layer. One of the things we learned, I think, working on this project with Lincoln, And we've now introduced what we call an Assure 360 console. And that's the need to get visibility to what's happening in the environment, into the business, into the customers. So we've created this now, and we'll continue to evolve so that Satendra or anybody in the organization can log on and look and have visibility to what's happening in that cloud environment.
And security isn't the only risk of these large projects, Terry. So I'm just curious, your perspective when you are speaking with insurers around the globe and they're facing these kinds of decisions and these kinds of challenges that they have to solve for. How are you working, how is AWS working to help lower those risks or mitigate those risks?
Sure, and accelerate value too, I think is part of that piece too. So I think that one thing comes to mind is that we like to say at AWS, you probably heard in some of the keynotes, that there's no compression algorithm for experience. And we have a lot of experience in this, and we built our security platform over time with direct customer feedback too. 90% of what we build comes from direct customer feedback, and we infer the other 10% from that. So getting feedback from projects like this directly from customers, from our partners and customers like DXC around that too. And that's an important point as well, working with a partner like DXC who also has deep experience, not only in their own product, of course, but also in managing these kinds of projects going forward too. So managing all those pieces is extremely important. Doing so in a coordinated fashion, of course, very important too. We work very closely with partners like DXC and DXC specifically to help them to modernize their system and think through security and all those components of it too. We say security job zero for us, right? It's absolutely essential that that basic building block is done perfect, well, as perfect as you can get, as well as you can do it. And part of that is communication, right? Working with and sharing those best practices with both partners and with the customers around that too, and working together with them to get that done. I think from the overall project management part of this is very important too. Obviously, this has been done well. By all accounts, ran fairly smoothly in a very short period of time, very complex. But often, and I'm sure many of us can share war stories about projects that have gone off the rails because of lack of paying attention to some key aspects of kind of the basic blocking and tackling of project management. And so I'd love, we could share some war stories around that later if you ever drink during the happy hour if you like. But we're talking about a good project, a well-run project today, so we don't have to think about that. But I think that is key too. Thinking that throughout the project, how security and how the value levers are going to be achieved throughout that. And those value levers, and we talked about it a little bit, it is extremely important to identify what those value levers are, what you are trying to achieve, and be very clear and open with yourself and listen to outside counsel on if those things are achievable or not. Be very clear in that, both IT and business working together to identify those business values. And we do that quite a bit with our customers, often alongside of our partners too, to start with that end goal in mind. What is it you're trying to achieve? And when part of the thing that my team bring to the table is what other insurers are doing around the world too, and what we see and what the best practices are there as well. But thinking that through, being very clear and very focused around that. Once you have that, and we talked about it a little bit, and very important is the top-down communication throughout the organization. This is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. So let's all get on board together and work together to get that done. And we have a leadership principle called disagree and commit. Not everybody in the organization was probably behind it, right? But giving them the ability to express that disagreement often gives them the ability then to commit to the success of it afterwards. If they've expressed it and you've addressed their concerns around that, then they need to have that culture of, okay, I've said my piece, but we're still going in this direction. Now let's get it done and really focus on getting it done well. So I think those are some of the key things that we have seen around the world leading toward a more successful project than otherwise.
I'll just add one line to that. You just cannot not re-emphasize the people part, right? Because this is a path not traveled, right? So you don't know. And fear and the past experiences. Means I was fortunate, right, that my Lincoln executive leadership, my peers, my team, everyone rallied. But important thing is that engage them, let them speak, let them give you insight because the knowledge they have over years, the fear they have, let them bring them out, right? I'm sitting here speaking, but I'm just a spokesperson. This is a handwritten work of not only 1,000 people in the project, but also the people who supported throughout the Lincoln, our business partners, right, who were ready to take risk with us, day in, day out, right? So what you're saying is so important that if people are together, I believe that if you put your heart and mind at something, there is nothing you cannot do, but you have to be just to be together. And I was just fortunate. So I'm a spokesperson, but trust me, I'm just one amongst the 1,000.
Right.
Right? So without all of them, this is not possible. So I would just reemphasize the point.
Agree.
So I'd like to wrap up with the same question for all of you. And if we have a couple minutes left and there's any questions on the audience, we'll take a couple of those as well. But what are your recommendations for your peers as they consider their own get off the mainframe cloud modernization journey? Terry, start with you.
So one is get started, right? This is, as I mentioned earlier on, although we're still early in the journey in life insurance, insurance overall, it is accelerating. So if you're not getting this done, if you're not starting to think about it, then you're in danger of falling behind. So that's step one is get started. And I think everybody is here in the room to listen to this. You're at reInvent. And so I think that's kind of preaching to the choir, so to speak. So I think that everybody here would agree with that. Getting started is very important. For us, experimentation, the culture of experimentation, very important too, and how that manifests itself in projects like this, and part of the de-risking of it is working backwards from what you're trying to achieve, identify that as I was talking about before, but then identify areas that you can run pilots, POCs, as quickly as possible. This does not mean be slow, do a POC, a pilot, test it. No, this means move fast, but identify those small-ish projects so you can get started, get some lessons learned. If it's working well, scale it up quickly, start moving other workloads. If it's not working for whatever reason, harvest those lessons learned and go in a different direction, right? That scale up, scale down quite quickly. And really start to build that flywheel of experimentation, move quickly, scale up if it's going well, scale down if it's not, and accelerate. Perhaps you're not going to get to a 2-year journey like Lincoln, excuse me, but go as fast as you can, or as fast as it makes sense for the things that you're trying to achieve around that. Identifying those business value levers that you're trying to achieve too. Stay on top of new tools and technologies. You're here doing that, so again, kind of preaching to the choir, but there's a lot of cool stuff coming out. A lot of cool stuff is maturing that came out in the past couple of years. Gen AI, of course, being a big tool in our toolkit. It's only one of many, right? So it's one of many. It's a very exciting one. There's a lot of very interesting stuff coming out. Identify the path that makes the most sense for you. There are, as we've already talked about, there are many different paths you can take to achieve this kind of modernization. There should be no question that the modernization is needed, but find the path and work with us, work with partners like DXC to identify the path that makes the most sense for you. And again, just to wrap that up, get started, get going.
Bryce, your recommendations.
Go ahead, Bryce.
I would say, start, and I agree with the comment, it can't be a technology-only product. Understand the business value and have it grounded in that. Then I would say, don't be afraid of it. This isn't leading edge anymore.
Right.
There's a lot of experience out there. And the biggest challenge even with this project wasn't the technology, it was the speed at which we're trying to, get it done and the way. But there's a lot of good experience, a lot of learnings. There's a lot more tools. If we did this one again, and when we do the next one like this, we've even, done a lot of work since this with AI tools to go and understand those surround technologies where there's no documentation, and so that you go into it with a much better understanding. So I would say, don't be afraid of it. It is, it's here.
And Satendra, last word.
Yeah, I think as an industry, we are insurance professionals. We need to move the industry forward, right? At Lincoln, we were very clear, right? The value. We were clear the value, right? Cost. So mainframe cost is growing year over year. Some of the software partners have jacked up their price heavily. So we had a clear CBA, right? We are going to get 40 to 50% reduction in the cost, expense reduction, and a lot in cost avoidance, number one. The second was that future-proofing the company to really tap into the new tools and technologies coming to become differentiated, right? So we are doing it for business, right? As a Lincoln business, we want to differentiate in the the market space, right? And the third was that if it has run for this year, how the next 100 year will run and how we will integrate with that future. So we were very clear, like, we had CBA, we had business outcomes, we had also about the future-looking journey, and speed to market, right? I'm yet to see, right? They're too early to speak for speed to market, so I'm not speaking much. But with all this decentralization and all this containerization and being cloud-enabled, hopefully we can start launching product faster. I'm just not saying prematurely because we haven't seen that yet. Right now, we have just launched, and we're only 90% done, so we're not complete. And I think last 10%, if you climb Mount Everest, is called the final ascent. That's the toughest one. So we are at the last 10%. So just wish us well that we complete. And it will be 2.5 years, but 75 million line code, 120 systems, 2.5 year will be a great role model for our industry to just look into and learn from it and actually do better than us, I would say.
Yeah.
All right, and with that, I'd like to thank the panel. It was fantastic. I really appreciate it.